This is CNN Breaking News.
Within the past hour, Turkey started its long-expected military offensive into northeastern Syria.
It appears this all was sparked by a conversation between Donald Trump and President Erdogan where perhaps Turkey felt they had, quote, a green light.
US troops went to Syria to help defeat ISIS and make sure the group doesn't make a comeback. But President Trump has repeatedly said he wants the US out of Syria altogether.
It is time to give our brave warriors in Syria a warm welcome home.
Despite opposition from his own Pentagon. Turkey has long made it clear that it is opposed to American support for the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, claiming the Kurds are merely a branch of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which has been fighting a war against the Turkish state since 1984. Turkey calls them terrorists. The Turkish want to set up a 30-kilometre or 18-mile deep safe zone inside Syria along the border, which includes many predominantly Kurdish towns and cities. Turkey also wants to resettle 2 million Syrian refugees there, even though most come from western Syria. The Kurds say the Turkish-American agreement is a stab in the back by the United States. They say they weren't consulted and will resist a Turkish invasion, and now the UN is concerned a Turkish invasion will spark. Bill carries out hit-and-run attacks. With Americans pulling back and Kurdish forces busy dealing with the Turks, a vacuum opens up for ISIS to reassert itself in. Already, the Kurds say they're reducing the number of troops guarding ISIS prisoners and their families, increasing the possibility of a breakout. The White House says Turkey will now be responsible for the ISIS prisoners, many of whom entered Syria through Turkey in the first place. With the Kurds under pressure from Turkey and feeling betrayed by their American allies, it's possible they will strike a deal with the regime in Damascus, who are supported by Russia and Iran. And they may in the end be the ultimate winner in all of this.
Democrats in the House are getting ready to accelerate their impeachment inquiry against President Trump as they return to Capitol Hill from recess this week. Tomorrow is a big day. Fiona Hill, who served as the president's top Russia advisor until she left in August, she's expected to be interviewed by the 3 House panels who have been carrying out these interviews. And all eyes then are going to be on Gordon Sondland on Thursday. He's the president's ambassador to the European Union, and he's going to be deposed under subpoena after refusing to testify last week. Now, this brings us to our weekly segment, Cross-Exam, with CNN legal analyst and former federal and state prosecutor Elie Honig. He is here to answer your questions about all of this complicated legal news. Now, Elie, first of all, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah.
The White House has been arguing that they don't need to comply as much because the House has not yet held a formal vote on the impeachment inquiry. So we have one viewer who's asking, is that legally correct?
No, it's not legally correct. There is no requirement that the full House of Representatives vote in order to start an impeachment inquiry. The Constitution does not require it. There's no statute that requires it. And just Friday, 2 days ago, a federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. ruled that there is no such requirement. Now, that said, historical precedent tells us there were full House votes before the Nixon and Clinton impeachment inquiries. I think what the White House is doing here is they're making a political play and a legal play. Politically, they're trying to force a tough vote on Democrats from swing districts. And I think legally, they're trying to extract concessions, such as having their own subpoena power. Don't count on Nancy Pelosi to give them that. But here's the thing to keep in mind. Nancy Pelosi has a very interesting decision to make. If she holds the vote, and she's only going to hold the vote if she has the votes, then she'll essentially be calling out this objection from the White House. On the other hand, even if they hold the vote and it passes, that will not end the White House objection. It's not as if the White House is suddenly going to say, here's all the witnesses and evidence you want. They're just going to raise executive privilege and other objections. So this is round one. there are many more to come.
Many more to come, indeed.
Yes.
When it comes to Ukraine, Ellie, the president has said that he has not done anything wrong, that he was not trying to dig up dirt on Joe Biden and his son, that he was simply trying to root out corruption in a country that, frankly, gets a lot of money, taxpayer money, from the United States. So the question to you is, from this viewer, isn't the president entitled to root out corruption in foreign countries, especially if we send them millions in foreign aid?
In theory, yes, a president is entitled to try to root out corruption in foreign countries. The problem here is it is an absolute fiction to suggest that that's what Donald Trump was trying to do in respect to Ukraine. If you look at the phone call between Donald Trump and President Zelensky, if you look at the text between the State Department advisors, it is crystal clear. The only case Donald Trump cares about is the investigations that he wants launched of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Hillary Clinton. When Trump was asked this week, well, what other cases have you been interested in, Mr. Corruption Buster? He said, we would have to look. And I guess they're still looking. There are no other cases. The thing is, Alex, there are proper channels if the United States wants to coordinate with the foreign government on a criminal investigation. It's called a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, MLATs, we used to call them. I've done them as a federal prosecutor. And there are established legal channels. And to me, the fact that the president went way outside those legal channels, I think says a lot about his state of mind.
Ellie, one of the bigger twists in all of this was in the past week, 2 associates working with Rudy Giuliani were arrested and indicted by the Southern District of New York for allegedly funneling money, foreign money, into U.S. elections. So one viewer wants to know, could Giuliani, by association, himself face these same criminal charges?
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani is in legitimate trouble here. We now know he's under investigation by the Southern District of New York, the office that Rudy Giuliani himself used to lead in the 80s. I worked at a couple decades later. I'll tell you, as an alum of that office, it is jarring to think that the former U.S. attorney is now under investigation, but this is real. Yeah, the Southern District indictment last week of Parnas and Fruman is a serious case. They're charged with funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars of foreign money into the U.S. election system through a shell company. Rudy Giuliani has close connections to these 2 guys. They were his point people in Ukraine. They paid him. And the best detail of all, of course, is the company they used to pay Rudy Giuliani is called Fraud Guarantee. They need a new marketing company or something. But look, Rudy is in legitimate trouble here. We got to watch the Southern District very closely.
Yeah, and the president is sticking close to him, at least this weekend. Those are the viewer questions.
Yep.
There are a lot of different strands that we're following. What are you looking at this week?
First of all, are either of these guys who were just arrested, Parnas or Fruman, are either of them going to cooperate with the Southern District? If they do, that's going to be potentially very big trouble for Rudy Giuliani and for others. Second, will the U.S. Supreme Court take the Trump tax returns case? That Friday decision went against Trump, so now it's up to the Supreme Court. They may not take it, and if they don't, it's over, and those tax returns go to Congress. And then finally, will we see more federal employees testify despite White House efforts to block them? We saw the ambassador Yovanovitch last week. She testified, and we have a whole lineup of important witnesses coming in this week.
Right.
I think the White House's stonewall is starting to crumble, and I think we're going to keep learning more and more every day, Alex.
How often have we said big week ahead? This week really does feel like a monumental one in this impeachment.
It's going to be big, no question, Alex.
Ellie Honig, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Behind me, actually, right now, is a graveyard full of Kurdish fighters who gave their lives in the battle against ISIS, where Kurdish fighters really were on the forefront. They were the ones dying by the thousands, the U.S.'s staunchest ally on the ground. We saw the funeral for one SDF fighter just about an hour ago. But earlier in the day, as you said, we went to a U.S. base to try to get a sense from the American soldiers, who are still here, by the way, nearly 1,000 of them, as to how they feel about the fact that the U.S. is essentially, by pulling back those 50 or to 100 special forces troops from that swath of the border, have basically allowed for this Turkish military intervention to take place. Take a look. So even though U.S. forces have pulled back from the border area where Turkey is staging this military operation, there are still U.S. military personnel deployed across parts of northern Syria. We're here at one U.S. base. You can see in the distance there the American flag billowing, and we want to try to get a sense from the Americans who are stationed here how they feel about the U.S.'s decision to essentially allow President Erdogan of Turkey to go ahead and launch this military operation against the Kurds. The Kurds, of course, have been the U.S.'s main ally on the ground in the battle against ISIS. What's interesting to see is that even though this is a U.S. base, it's actually guarded and protected by Kurdish forces. You can imagine that things must be a little bit tense between them right now. So, unsurprisingly, the Americans don't want to talk to us right now. Someone did come out to at least greet us. They were very polite, but they said due to the sensitive nature of their work here, they can't say a thing. Just outside the base, you can see a poster to commemorate all the Kurdish fighters who have died in the battle against ISIS. Kurdish fighters have been telling us about the Americans. They feel that they've been sold out and that the U.S. is not going to do anything to help them in this fight against Turkey. Clarissa Ward, CNN, Northern Syria.